We're live.
Hi, everybody.
I know you guys haven't seen our faces in forever, so this
It's
might
been
be
a
a
while.
shock.
It's been a long time.
Right. I'm like, wow. I haven't had to get dressed up in a minute.
I am so excited for this live. It's been a long time since I've been so excited to talk about a book.
Okay.
Look,
I was just about to say, I was like, I think this book might have revived my desire to go back and read books.
it got you out of that reading slump real quick.
Not even like, I couldn't put the book down. Like, I had to actively tell myself, put it down. You do have things you need to go do. Go handle that.
Yes.
And now I'm like, I wonder what else I can read.
Right. And the audiobook is such a great decision. Like for anyone who did not read this book via the audiobook, I feel so sorry for you, because I feel like 75 to 80% of the experience, the joy, the everything you missed.
It's like, if you didn't listen to the audiobook, I don't know what you were doing, darling.
Darling. Darling, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh my gosh.
It was so good. And when I tell you, for those of y'all that did not listen to the audiobook, well, first of all, we should probably start off with our intro.
Yeah, I'm about to say, before we jump into this, let's do our intro. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to Black Prose Club, where Black lives, Black books, and Black authors have always mattered. I am Brittany, aka Melanin Eclectic. And again, I'm super excited about this book. So, hurry up, Oshley.
Yeah, we're so excited. Okay, I'm Oshley of Oshi Reads. And the book of this past 2 months has been The Meaning of Mariah Carey. And I feel so bad because it's not just written by Mariah Carey. There's also a co-author as well.
Yes. Hold on, I can pull that up.
Okay, because I'm sure she contributed heavily.
She did, I'm sure.
To the writing of this novel.
So it is The Meaning of Mariah Carey with Michaela Angela Davis.
There we go. So Michaela Angela Davis and Mariah Carey put together this autobiography of her life thus far, everything she's been through, her childhood, her career, her love life, everything. And I can finally say the title of the book now because it finally makes sense after reading the book.
Right.
And also, I just want to put a disclaimer. If you have not read this book and you have interest in reading this book, don't even watch this live, because we are going to be spoiling. We are going to be discussing.
I'm not like this is not going to be one of those critical assessment type things. I don't really think you should critically assess a memoir anyway. And I just know there's a lot of topics that we're going to talk about that are nothing but spoilers. Nothing but spoilers
all up and through this bitch. So if you don't want to be
right, it's like, listen, just put it on the watch list and watch it later, because it's gonna be nothing but spoilers. Just letting y'all know that right now. I'm not gonna say spoiler alert. This whole live will be nothing but spoilers.
This whole live. Okay, so I feel so bad because I don't have my computer. I usually use my computer to like help me remember things in my notes. I don't have access to my notes. Because I
have my notes written down in the Melanin Eclectic reading planner.
Okay, darling. Okay.
Also, the amount of times that I've used the word darling since reading this book, I was like, somebody's going to be so annoyed with me because I'm going to just randomly be like, darling, get it together.
Right? I will just say that one of the greatest like gems that you get from listening to the audiobook is not just like Mariah and her goofiness and her bougie like ad libs,
amazingness,
also just so good, but also just like the singing. They're singing in
I wasn't like nobody, like I know that people kept telling me listen to the audiobook, it's amazing, but no one specifically told me why. Like everybody just kept saying this book is so good, this book is so good, this book is so good. And I'm like, okay. And I get the audiobook, and then not only does she bust out in song, she explains the lyrics to some of her songs. And I'm like, I have started going back and listening to Mariah Carey's work, and they hit so differently now. I'm like, this was a song. Oh my God. Like, I'm never going to be mad at her Christmas song ever again.
I know. And
I'm never.
I will never look at Derek Jeter the same way ever again in my life.
That's like way too far. So like, okay, we're gonna try to do this. We're gonna start at her childhood.
Yes.
And then we're gonna try to work through her life. Even though in the book she does jump a little bit back and forth, like there are some like very key child moments in her life that she recalled that I wanted to hug her and her daddy multiple times. I wanted to punch her mom in the straight face.
I'm so sad I don't have my notes, because in my notes I have like the names of everybody. And for those of y'all that are unaware, I've been having technical difficulties, so I'm doing this on my phone, so I don't have access to my notes, which are all on my computer. But it had like the technical stuff, like the year she was born, the full name of her parents. I mean, Alfred Roy Carey, and her mom's like Patricia.
Yeah, but I'm never gonna forget Alfred Roy Carey, because Sunflowers for Roy hits. I was just like
crying, tears.
I was like, okay.
Let's create some structure here. So Mariah Carey was born. I don't have my notes.
I don't remember when she was born. I just know that she was born to a family where there was already an older brother and an older sister, to a Black father and a white mother, in a time where they didn't even refer to it as mixed kids. They just used the phrase interracial.
Yeah, and other derogatory terms.
Yeah.
Her father, Alfred Roy, was a vet. Was he in Vietnam?
Yes, he was in the military. I don't know if he was Vietnam. So. I know he was a vet. I don't remember like which time he served, but I know he was a vet.
Yeah, he was a veteran. He'd served in the armed forces, and her mother was a trained, failed opera singer. Like, she had a career, and then she kind of gave it up to marry their dad and have kids, which Mariah often expressed like she didn't really understand why she made that decision. And so when Mariah was born, like Brittany said, she was born into a family that had already been a family for quite some time. There was a huge age gap between her and her two older siblings. So they kind of got to experience their family unit being a family unit, whereas she came into the picture and then her parents
around the end.
Her parents divorced shortly afterwards. So she grew up primarily with her mother. And we kind of get to see how that affected her, being essentially a mixed race but white presenting biracial child with her mother, but having a Black father. And it seemed like for quite some time in her childhood, she was able to maintain a strong relationship with her father up until her, I would say, mid-teens, like right before her career took off. I think she was able to maintain a pretty good relationship with her father despite the divorce. But a lot of her trauma happened while she was with her mother. And let me just say, reading this book, I mean, I've always felt this way, but reading this book and just reading about her childhood has really made me feel even more strongly about how, like, parenthood is the most important job you can ever have as a human being, and how the detrimental effects of poor parenting, neglect, abuse can really damage a child to the point where Mariah Carey's in her 50s and she's still dealing with the things that she experienced as a child, which is so heartbreaking.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't even know where to begin because it was just so much. Like
we can focus on the fact of why she's so obsessed with Christmas, because that was one of the first things that she really broke down. And she's so obsessed with Christmas because she had wanted her family to act like a family during the holidays so much that it became like this internalized need, like, oh, it's Christmas, like everything will be better because it's Christmas. Like She was so young, but so observant to everything that was going on that she started literally trying to basically put on a show for Christmas to like make her family like act better for Christmas. And so that's why all I want for Christmas is you. I used to think it was just her talking about a dude, but it was really her just talking about how she just wanted her family to be a family. And I'm just like,
so sad when you think about
I will never complain about this song playing on the radio ever again, because to have that desire as a kid and it to be ruined by such large levels of toxicity. I should also warn that if anybody does read this book, there are trigger warnings. There's trigger warning for physical abuse, mental abuse. There's trigger warning for
emotional abuse,
all child abuse,
racial abuse,
racial abuse. She dealt with so much, and she was dirt poor on top of dealing with all of that. Like, as if she needed anything else to deal with more. Let's add in broke fi broke.
So the book opens and she kind of sets the stage of what her family dynamic was like. So she has this father who's a former veteran, who's very just like type A personality, very stoic, very rigid. He was described as being very strict with her older brother and sister, Morgan. And what was the sister's name? The brother's name was Morgan.
Sister.
The sister's
I just
name.
kept calling her sister.
Again, the fact that I don't have my notes is killing me right now. But
I remember Morgan's name, but for some reason I never remembered her sister's name.
But so the father apparently was like super, super hard on them. And growing up, Morgan and her sister were very good in school. She expressed that they were very intelligent and kind of seemed like the trajectory of their lives was going to be good because their father was so strict about grades and just behavior and things of that nature. And then, but it's juxtaposed. She talks about that, but it's juxtaposed with the opening of the book talks about her earliest memory, and her earliest memory is when she was 3 years old, and her father and her brother were literally beating the crap out of each other
Allison
outside their house in Brooklyn Heights, and the cops were called, and I believe her grandmother was there, and her grandmother was comforting her, and her mother had just like completely forgotten she was even there. Her mother was freaking out. So she's 3 years old, completely just scared, doesn't know what's happening, watching her father and her brother. She thinks that they're going to kill each other. The police are called, which is never good in a situation like that when the police are called and Black men are involved. Just let's be real. It just never ends well. And her grandmother is the one comforting her because her mom is just like neglectful from jump. We get that her mom doesn't always realize that she's there, remember her, want to care for her. It's really sad. And
as a mother.
Let me just say this, and this is going to be somewhat controversial, but I feel like I need to get this off my chest.
Oh God, here we go.
I feel like the image of white women who marry Black men and have their children is so bad right now. Like y'all need to be upset about y'all.
There's also a trend. There's literally a trend on TikTok right now that it's like, tell me you were a mixed child and you were raised by a white mother who didn't really understand what being mixed meant and treated you and was racist towards you as a mixed kid. And there's a whole trend on TikTok about this. And I was like, to read this book where Mariah, a mixed child, voices how she feels like her mother fetishized her father. Like, how do you, as the daughter of these parents, like, how does that register to you? Because it's like she said that she believes that her mom married her dad out of a rebellious thing towards her parents.
So her mom came from this like very, very white collar Irish Catholic background.
Yes.
And the way that Mariah Carey describes her, because her mother was a widow, I believe. Her grandmother was a widow who raised her mother and her siblings. And marrying Black was the worst thing that you could do, to the point where her grandmother disowned her mother.
Yes.
For her mother marrying her father. So already it's not starting off well.
Right.
She only remembers meeting her grandmother one time in her entire life. And she doesn't even remember why they were there, what the particular circumstances were. And she just remembers that her grandmother wasn't very nice to her. She had heard stories about her grandmother calling them like mutts and like derogatory terms and things like that, and wanted nothing to do with her. And the one occasion she met her was very cold, distant, wasn't very warm, and then just taught her the Lord's Prayer, and I guess thought she was doing something for her. And that was the only time she ever met her grandmother on her mother's side. So we clearly see a situation where this white woman has been disowned by her community for her choice in marital partners. And I don't know, Mariah never comes out and says it in the novel, but I can read between the lines, and I feel like her mother resented her father and therefore took the resentment out on the kids. And for some reason, she fell into that typical woman, not even like white woman, but just woman behavior of like loving the son more and treating the daughters like crap.
I was literally going to get there. I was like, the way that she talked, the way that she glorified Morgan.
Allison.
Yes.
That's her name.
The
sister. So Allison was basically thrown away like she was trash.
Because Mariah came out more white passing than her.
Yes.
Let's just be honest.
Let's just be honest. And I think the mom saw Mariah and was like, okay, I can pretend with this one.
Because remember, there was a scene where she told her father, you can't have this one. This one's mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like.
And she didn't allow the father to like physically discipline Mariah by hitting her or anything. Mariah got away with a lot. And so that created resentment in the family because her brother and her sister never cared for her, never treated her lovingly, were very cruel
I felt
to her.
so bad for her. I'm like,
her brother,
my siblings get on my nerves, but they've never like.
It was straight hate.
They hated her. They hated her
because she was. I think it's because she was white passing, and they kind of saw the favoritism she was getting for being white passing, and they thought she had it easy because the father wasn't as strict with her, and he wasn't as like rigid with her, and so they perceived it. From what Mariah said in the book, it seems like her siblings perceived her as being the favorite and having it the easiest, and so they like hated her for that, which is so sad because the way they treated her.
She was like a whole 15, 16 years younger than them. Like they were basically adults by the time that she hit 11 or 12 years old. Like there was a huge age gap, an age gap on top of a massively toxic family, on top of a father who was unable to have any type of real emotional connection to his children because of his trauma. And then their mother who Mariah kept saying it was because she lived like a hippie lifestyle, but that kept translating to me as in she just didn't give a fuck.
I personally think the mother just never did the work, as we love to say these days, since we're so woke. But the mother never did the work to understand the dynamics of her children. Like your children are not white, but they're also not 100% black. So they're going to exist in a unique space. And she just didn't seem it. She reminded me of those people that are like, I don't see color. And they like to pretend and they like to shove things under the rug and just pretend everything's fine.
But then in the very same breath talking about, I like my coffee how I like my men.
It's a cognitive dissonance, though, because on one hand, you act like you're oblivious. And then on the other hand, you purposefully take the child that looks the whitest because you know what that means and you know what that looks like. And you think it's going to be easier for you. But her parents, Mariah Carey's parents, did not have I don't know if it was the courage or the ability, the understanding. She says that they didn't have the language, but I'm sorry, they were adults. Okay.
It was what? That was in the 80s, right?
There's no excuse. I'm sorry. She was like, oh, I don't think they had the language to explain to me what it meant being mixed race. And I think she's being overly generous. I don't think it's that. I think it's the father was completely caught up in his own trauma from being in the military and being incredibly racially discriminated upon and just racially abused in the United States Army. And he
which not surprised.
Still dealing with that. And then the mother was dealing with, personally, I feel like the mother was a narcissist. The way that it came across from the story.
I have lots of opinions on the mother.
I hate to just.
I have lots. I did not like that woman. Like, well, like even when she was like, remember like when Mariah was talking about how she was at school and her mother wrote a letter, and like somehow in the letter she also figured out a way to add in that that Mariah's daddy was black, and it's like in the 70s and 80s there were not a lot of interracial couples. And so there was also a lot more racism that was acceptable in like everyday space. So Mariah was a little bit safer from them not knowing what she was. And then the moment that they found out what she was, it was literally smack in your face. And she didn't even feel like she could talk to her mom about it because she felt like her mom would just make a scene. Not that her mom will actually help her. And it's like, this is what we be talking about. Like, if you're going to have children and your children are mixed, you have to be able to facilitate that space for your children because they need that space. because they're not going to be enough or be too much or be not enough on this side or be too much on this side. Like they can't win. So it's like if your own parents are not even giving you a space to be present in, like what are you supposed to do? And then for her case, she also had to deal with that from her siblings as well, because her siblings, she had said, were darker than she was. So she was dealing with that. And the only people that defended her were her cousins on her dad's side.
Yes. So when we look at Mariah Carey's family, we have her white side of the family, which looked down on her for being part black. And then the black side of her family, who genuinely loved her and tried to support her as much as they could. But because her parents' divorce was so ugly, she never got a chance to really hang out with the black side of her family as much as she probably should have been around them. Yes. So it's like the moments she got to be with them were so like brought her so much joy and feeling of belonging and family. But it was like few and far between because her parents didn't get along, and she saw her dad pretty regularly at some points, and then others she didn't. So there just was a lot of rockiness going on. And so she was spent the first couple of years of her life in Brooklyn Heights. And then when her parents divorced, she ended up moving with her mom to Long Island, which was like the worst thing her mother could have done. Her mother should have kept her in Brooklyn Heights.
It was very like, we're fine because you look white enough type situation. Like she moved where she would belong rather than where her daughter would belong.
Yes. And the sad thing is, and this is why I think her mother is a narcissist, because she makes everything about herself and she doesn't put her children's needs before her own. Her mother basically put her in these super white spaces where there was no diversity whatsoever, and she was the only person of color in all of the places that they lived in, all of the schools that she went to. So she was always othered. She was always racially bullied once they found out that she was black. Once they saw her father or heard of her father or realized her father was black, it was literally like any chance of being able to fit in that she had out the window. Some of the incidents that occurred, let's just begin with her being literally like 4 or 5 and drawing a picture of her family and like, what was she? No, I think she was 6, I think.
She was, yeah, she was like in first grade and the teachers were laughing at her because they're like, you obviously used the wrong crayon.
For her father. She used the peach crayon for her mom, and she also used the peach crayons for her siblings.
Because she said she couldn't, because back then they didn't have that many colors.
They didn't have like a caramel type crayon. So she was like, well, I guess I'll use the peach one but her dad obviously is not.
Her dad was that one dark brown crayon that was in the box.
And so the teachers literally surrounded her and started laughing at her. And as a small child, you don't know why they're laughing. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what's so wrong. And they're just like, they just keep saying over and over, use the wrong crayon, use the wrong crayon. And then they go over into the corner and start whispering and talking about her. And as a child, I can't imagine the psychological damage that does to you, because you're just a child. No one's really explained to you that your family dynamics is wrong, whatever. Right. It's not wrong, obviously, but to society. And you're just, to you, your father's your father, your mother is your mother, your siblings are your siblings. You don't see anything else. It's completely normal to you. And you have these people who are adults who are supposed to be your teachers, authority figures that you're supposed to look up to and trust, literally making fun of you and laughing at you. I was so shocked. Like I had to take a moment. I was listening to it and I had to pause because I was so
even on the flip side of that, because her black side also gave her some moments where she was worried about her lips, or the fact that she didn't dance. She doesn't dance because they told her she wasn't black enough to dance. Like both sides of the adults in her life gave her so many complexes. And it's just like, oh my God. I was like, there's so much. Not to mention, there's like a very, very big place in hell for parents who raise their kids to be just blatant racist. And the way that Mariah had to encounter racism, more specifically with the white girls that she was in school with.
So traumatic.
That was the most terrible thing I think I've ever read that has happened real life to a person in a long time. Like, imagine being far away, being an hour and some change away from your mother.
Wait, we have to tell the whole story because people are going to be like, what are you talking
Oh, okay. Well, Mariah was in a school. She was invited to a sleepover after her mother had sent some letter to one of the girls' dads. And I guess in the letter had made it clear that Mariah's daddy was Black. I guess she thought that was a badge of honor. I don't know. Her mom was weird. And so she ended up getting invited to the sleepover with the cool girls, the mean girls group, basically. And she was very excited because she thought she was like making friends and everything else. And then the poor baby gets to the house
an hour away from her
mother, where these girls corner her in it downstairs and start chanting the N-word at her, telling her, "You're an N. You're an N.
Over and
You're
over
an N."
over
just
and
over and over and over. I'm like,
it's literally like something out of a horror film to me, because I can only picture, what was she, like 9, 10, not even, maybe 12?
I think
11?
she was in elementary school, but
I think she was 11 or 12, right?
Yeah.
And you have no idea what's going on. You don't have the language to express the feelings that are coursing through you. You're completely paralyzed in fear.
Right.
And she starts crying hysterically and they wouldn't stop.
And I'm just like, where were the parents?
The parents are the ones that raise these kids. Would they have?
I know, but it's just like, dang. So this, like, she's crying hysterically, has no one, and then she didn't feel like she should tell her mom because she didn't want her mom causing a scene.
She thought her mom would make it worse, because the only reason her mom sent the letter is because one of the little girls' father was abusive, and he was abusing, I guess, the family.
Oh yeah, like for some reason she thought that was the way to save this woman's life, and it was like, why did you interject that Mariah's daddy was Black? Like, what could that have possibly added to the conversation, sis?
The mother, to me, is the kind of mother that eats her young. You know, in the wild, those moms that eat their young. That's how the mom comes across to me. That's how Patricia came across to me, or Pat. She literally eats her own children in so many ways, because there's another incident where and this is the part that really, that scene was traumatizing. I had to stop reading the book for the rest of the day after I read that scene. But there's another scene in her childhood that just emphasizes her mother's neglect. Her mother didn't know what to do with her hair.
The bangs.
Not even just the bangs, but Mariah goes through this whole thing in the novel where she talks about how she just wished she had straight Caucasian hair like her mom, because her mom didn't know how to deal with it. How she would watch these herbal essences commercials and want that shampoo.
Oh my gosh, yes, so because she just knew the shampoo was gonna like fix her hair.
And her hair was matted. And y'all, we've all seen Mariah Carey's hair. It's not even like, what is it, like 3A? Like, not even. Like,
barely.
She doesn't have coarse hair, really. It's just curly and it's thick. And her mom, what that tells me, her mom didn't comb it. Her mom didn't even. Her mom
never took the time to comb it and kept calling it boho. Like, no, you just chose not to actually care for your freaking daughter. And then remember the scene where her dad's side of the family were gonna like straighten it, but Mariah's hair is too fine for the styling products that they was finna use, like that hot comb situation. I was like, hot combs are not for everybody.
The scene that stands out to me is Mariah being a little girl and her going to the beach with her brother and her brother's fine friend that she had a crush on. And she's sitting there and she feels something, and the brother's friend has a comb and he detangles and deknots Mariah's hair. And so for the first time in her childhood, she actually has well-kept hair, and it is her brother's friend who does it. And she finally feels like beautiful and pretty, and like her hair is flowing in the wind, like she saw in those herbal essences commercials, and that's all she wanted.
And then she almost drowned in the ocean because her mom wasn't watching her. Like, I was like, this moment, like, I was just like, yo, like,
4 years old.
And the only reason her mom even looked up is because she started crying. I'm like, woman, you over here laid out with your son. Woman, your baby.
I just have nothing but like disgust for her mom, because she just neglected her child to the point where I'm like,
she neglected and alienated her child. And like, I don't know if she knew how terrible that was. And I think because she was a white woman, she did not, because she even weaponized her whiteness against her children. So it's just hard. It's like, I understand why Mariah wasn't like going in on her parents. I get it, because there's her parents, and, you know, like, it's probably a lot for her to even say the things that she did say about her parents, because again, those are her parents. But I mean, she didn't talk about her dad as badly as she talked about her mom, but she also didn't spend as much time with her dad as she did with her mom. But her mom was a piece of work.
Her mother was detrimental to her mental health and caused her so much trauma through her neglect, through her emotional and mental abuse, through as Mariah got older and really started to work on her career and develop her talents. Her mother became jealous of her and tried to cut her down and tried to make her feel inferior. I mean, just craziness. And it's so interesting because Mariah's relationship with her mother is very, very, very much shades of gray, because throughout her career, Mariah has always taken care of her mother. She bought her mother a home. She's always bought her clothes and jewelry and kept her like in a nice standard of living and taken care of her and invited her to all the amazing things that she's got to do, like all the award shows and all these amazing creative opportunities. She's always brought her mother along. And so juxtaposed, when Mariah talks about that, juxtaposed with all of the traumatic things that happened to her when she was younger, simply because her mother was neglectful and just I don't even know. Like, her mother just seemed to be in her own little world and didn't understand that her child was going through so much. So now I want to move on from the mother a little bit and talk about the siblings.
Wait a minute. Miss WLC Reader, you're so right, because again, I've been listening to Mariah's album. You know, her second Christmas album, she did a song with her mom.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just like Mariah literally kept trying to like create a relationship with her mother, and her mother, which is a horrible freaking human being. Yeah. Unfortunately, it trickled down into her freaking children, because the two, Morgan and Allison
or something.
Let's talk about Allison first. Let's do Allison first, because Morgan is a whole other level.
Is on my shit list for life. Allison could literally die in a ditch tomorrow, and I'd be like, okay, feel bad for her though. Like, that's how I feel about Allison.
Because like, she talks so lovingly. Mariah talks so lovingly about her nephew / brother / father / grandfather. Talks so lovingly about him, and I adore that. But then I remember that young man is a product of Allison. Allison, the one who drugged her preteen sister.
Allison pimped out her sister.
Allison, who tried to get her sister to snort cocaine.
I mean, there's just so much here. Okay, so let's start with the beginning. So Allison, apparently, according to Mariah, was like this brilliant child. She also had some slight singing abilities, some artistic abilities. Everything was going well for Allison until her parents' divorce. And her parents' divorce is where things went off the deep end. Because before this, Allison was like a great student, super smart, I mean, there was a little bit in there about her being possibly sociopathic tendencies with like egging on her brother when he was going to a rage and things like that. But other than that, Allison seemed to be okay. And then when her parents divorced, they did that whole thing where it was like, well, who gets what kid?
Right.
And Pat, I'm not calling her Mariah's mom anymore. I'm calling her Pat, because that's what Mariah calls her. Pat decided that she was going to take Mariah because, you know, she's white passing. Let's be honest. That's why. And because she was the baby, and I'm sure she was really cute. And the father, Morgan, let's talk about Morgan. Morgan went into like a juvie, it sounds like, or something. Like, he went to the state.
I think the state did take him away from his, he was
so violent. Morgan is a whole nother story. We will get to him in a second.
Whole other.
Where to begin? Allison, so for what Mariah says, it seemed like Allison felt like she was thrown away because the mother didn't fight for her. So
right.
I think what happened is, I think Allison was close with her mom when they were a family, and I think when the mom was like, "I'm taking Mariah," and
like she was very adamant that she was taking Mariah and Morgan.
Yeah, the mom took Mariah and Morgan. This was before Morgan went to stay with the state because of some things that he did, which we will touch in a second. So Allison wasn't really wanted. And I don't think it's necessarily that the father didn't want Allison. I think that the father's personality is not one to be like verbose or overly emotional.
Yes.
So long story short, by default, Allison ended up with the dad, and she was very bitter about that, very resentful. She was acting out, and she started hanging out with boys and having sex and like trying to find that love that she was missing with men. And she ended up going down the wrong path. Obviously, it sounds like she damn near flunked out of school, and she got pregnant at what, 15?
15 or 6. No, I think she was 17 because she moved away with the military dude that she was impregnated by and got married to him while he was overseas.
I feel like she was 15. Because there was this part where Mariah was like, don't get pregnant at 15.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me because Allison was...
I think she was 15, had the baby at 16. But the father was like, you can have the baby if you get married to the guy.
Oh, yeah, because they were having a family discussion about whether or not she should get an abortion.
Horrible advice. Like, oh, marry this random guy that you probably don't even know that well. Yeah, why not? You don't know anything about him, please. And he was going to be stationed in the Philippines. So how can you be okay with your daughter going to the Philippines with some random dude that y'all don't know, all for the sake of appearances?
Yeah, and that's why she
probably made Allison feel even more alone.
Yeah, because she was kind of just thrown away. It's like, yes, we know Allison was trash, but Allison was not like, of all the children, Allison really was the throwaway child. And I know that sounds terrible to say, but even based on how Mariah tells the story, Allison was just kind of bloop, which is why she was divorced before 21.
Because the mother really loved the mother's favorite was obviously Morgan.
Obviously.
And then she also favored Mariah because Mariah was light-skinned and also had this amazing voice. So I think the mother connected to her because the mom is an acclaimed classical opera singer.
She said that was one of the few ways that her and her mom connected was through music. So I do think that was a factor in it as well.
So Allison was just kind of thrown to the wolves. So Mariah says that she kind of always looked up to her sister and loved her and
wanted a big sister.
But she didn't get to see her often. But there were certain incidences that occurred that made her realize that her sister didn't love her and that she needed to distance herself from them. And one of them was a series of incidences that occurred after Allison returns from the Philippines. After some years, she's now divorced, a single mother. And Mariah describes her demeanor as being greatly changed. She's no longer this bubbly, goofy girl. She is now kind of hardened and jaded, and she says looking back she didn't realize at the time what Allison was into, but now she realizes that Allison was basically on drugs and prostituting herself and was living in this I don't want to call it a whorehouse. Was it a whorehouse? What was it? It was like
that was the pimp's house.
With the pimp's house with another prostitute, I guess.
Well, she kind of sounded like she was the recruiter.
Yes. And so Allison would come by the house, and they used to live in this like shack, basically in Long Island, this like dirty, disgusting, tiny little house. But anyways, Allison would come by and like pick up Mariah and like take her to the arcade and take her to like the amusement park and like buy her all these things and like bought her a burner phone, basically. She didn't know it was a burner phone, but basically bought her a burner phone.
I mean, but she did everything that Mariah was looking for. She helped Mariah with her hair. She bought Mariah clothes.
Yes.
She made it like she treated her like the big sister treats her in the movies. Like Mariah had built such a fascination with movies and how families are portrayed in sitcoms or not sitcoms and movies and stuff, that to have her sister paying that kind of attention to her, like that was all she ever wanted. And then she taught her how to do her hair. Like she gave her highlights. Yeah, she was set.
Yeah, she was.
She even had clothes. And, you know, like she said, she was poor. So that kind of shit, like she really, and then the part that makes me sick is like when she realized that like her sister is like trying to pimp her out, they're like, her sister is treating her how a pimp would, showing her all the good things that she could have. Like Mariah loved going over to the pimp's house because she could get like Capri Suns and like
and there was cable.
Snacks. Yeah. And she considered them stable.
And I know we're not talking about Pat right now, but what really disturbs me is Allison introduces the family in a roundabout way to her older boyfriend, who's like clearly a lot older than her, aka the pimp. And the mother's fine with it because he buys them groceries every once in a while and fills up the refrigerator. So Pat just looks the other way. I mean, Pat's not dumb. She had to have known what was going on, but she just looks the other way because she's like, whatever. And Pat, you are a horrible human being. But anyways, so Mariah is a little kid. She's what, 11 years old?
She's 11 or 12.
She said she was in 7th grade. So yeah. 11, 12. So she doesn't really understand this. She just thinks, oh my gosh, my sister is so great. She wants to hang out with me. And her boyfriend is so nice. And this other woman is so glamorous. And they take me places and they buy me things. Where it gets dark, and honestly, I felt sick to my stomach when I was listening to this part, is Allison's boyfriend, aka the pimp, comes to pick up Mariah one day. And Mariah
because her sister called her and told her that her and her boyfriend were coming to pick her up. Let's talk about the setup.
So she shows up. Oh, before we get to this, let's talk about the damn burner phone and how she buys her sister a burner phone that no one knows about. And
she tells her sister, don't tell anybody that she got her the phone.
And then proceeds to use it to call her when she's literally suicidal.
And talking about how much she hates her life and
how much she wants to K herself.
Unalive herself. She's 12.
To a 12-year-old. And
she's
then Mariah
12.
Has to talk her off the ledge. She's 12. Talk her off the ledge and
and then go to school like nothing happened.
I
was like,
So we see where Allison is. We see where she's
we
at.
Do.
Okay?
We do.
Allison tells her, hey, I'm going to come pick you up. The boyfriend shows up, right? Mariah doesn't think anything of it at first. But then she realizes they're just driving, no Allison to be found. So she's like, where's my sister? And the pimp guy's like, don't worry about it. Takes her to these seedy ass places. These grown men doing dirty underhand dealings, looking up her 12-year-old child's body up and down to the point where she's so scared in these spaces that she just curls into a ball in the corner and just hope that they don't notice her. Meanwhile, they're commenting on her body and making crude and disgusting remarks. Grown men. Grown
freaking men.
She's 12. So at this point, she knows that she's in danger. She knows something's very, very wrong. Allison's not there, and she's with this man who's clearly a danger to her at this point. And the part that really turns my stomach is he then proceeds to take her to a drive-in movie.
Trigger warning. Oh no, did you freeze?
I can't literally. Are we back?
Okay, you're back. Yeah, I was about to say, no, right at this point, you can't freeze.
You know what? Even StreamYard is disgusted right now.
I know.
Even StreamYard. Okay. So he takes her to a drive-in movie, cozies up to her. He is a grown man. He had to have been at least in his 30s or 40s. Had to have been, because he was older than Allison. Puts his arm around her, forces himself on her, and kisses her. I'm literally sick.
But it gets worse, though. Because remember, when he drops her off at home, she disconnects the phone and she's like, I'm not even going to talk to my sister anymore. And he starts coming around the neighborhood looking for her.
He comes by her school.
And he starts trying to find her. She doesn't tell anybody.
She doesn't have anyone to tell.
She doesn't think to tell anybody because she doesn't feel safe, because there's no one that's made her feel safe enough to tell. It's just like, oh my God.
I think I have an echo. Can you? Is there an
I
echo,
don't.
y'all? Let us know.
I about to say I don't hear an echo, but if y'all hear an echo, let us know. Because another part of that leads to where Allison is at her mom's house. And of course, Mariah is still not even really connecting the two together, really. Like her sister's at the house. They're chilling, they're laughing, they're joking. And the father calls. And she's like, Mariah, don't tell dad I'm here. Now, sibling wise, I understand what Mariah is saying on this part because it's kind of like, well, if I got to talk to daddy, you're going to talk to daddy too. And her reaction to telling her dad that Allison was there was Allison threw scalding hot tea on Mariah at 12 years old, giving her 3rd-degree burns. And the doctors having to actually peel her favorite, one of her few good shirts off her skin that had melted onto her skin. And that's when she decided that she was going to cut her sister off.
Do y'all understand when I say if Allison dies in a ditch tomorrow, I'm not going to care?
Because at this time, she very much had Sean.
Yes.
And Sean stayed with Pat because she always left Sean there.
Pat.
Yeah, Sean was raised by Pat.
Interesting. You know what's interesting? And Sean grew up very well and grew up to be very successful. He's an attorney, I believe.
He's got his life together.
Do you know what's interesting? There is this theory that there's this pathology with white women. I'm not going to say all. Obviously, y'all know I don't mean all. Some white women that marry Black men for maybe not the most genuine purposes and have mixed children. There's this pathology that the women love the sons of those unions, but hate the daughters, and get along very well with like the male children, but don't get along well with the female children because there's this weird competition thing that happens with the female children, and that there's this weird pathology with them that the women see the female children as Black, and a lot of these women hate Black women. But they love Black men, obviously, which is why they had Black men's children. So they hate the girls because they see them as Black women, but they love the boys because they see them as Black men. I'm just putting it out there.
I can see that for some women. Yeah, I can definitely see that for some women. It's the same way that Black men want to get with women of other races to have quote unquote pretty babies.
Yes.
It's the same
all wrapped up in
fetishization.
I can never say that word. Fetishization.
Yeah.
And just like not having the purest of intentions when you go into these type of situations in unions. Like your intentions are not pure. Your heart is not really right. And you have all these other motives involved.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Mariah's situation was very interesting because it was interesting to see colorism from the other side.
Yes. She still experienced colorism no matter what she did.
Mm-hmm.
Even down to the way that people said things about her look.
Yep.
We don't want you to straighten your hair. It looks straightened.
Yeah.
What?
They can tell that you are Black when you straighten.
They can tell. That'll make it look too urban. Mm-hmm. What? Like
it was also interesting to see like the moments where the Black people in her life came through for her. Like one scene I remember in particular is she was in this one school where Mariah loved to pop off at the mouth, right? She was kind of like the class clown, the wisecracker. Like she
had to build some type of defense mechanism for her life. So obviously that mouth was her defense mechanism.
And there was a certain situation where she was in school and she was dating. She said she dated the biggest dude in the school simply because she wanted to feel safe at school. So that goes to show you something.
That's a whole other conversation for another day.
That's that. But there was a situation where she was about to be jumped by a whole bunch of these white girls, these white guidettes, I think.
Oh no, yeah, I forgot how she described them. I don't think it was guidettes.
Were at the beauty school. No, these girls were.
That was a beauty school.
I think these girls were like Italians or something. I'm not sure, but she was about to be jumped by a whole bunch of them.
Yep.
And she was scared because even though she popped up at the mouth, she was not about that life. Okay, she was not a fighter.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the girl started to like cringe and like back away from her and run away. And she was like, "Huh?" She looks behind her, and all the Black girls at school were behind her. And the leader was like, girl, we got your back. And keep in mind, she did not really associate with these girls like that. She wasn't friends with these girls. She didn't really talk to these girls. But when shit hit the fan, these girls had her back because they were like, nah, you ain't about to mess with us. I'm sorry. It was like a collective. You know,
it's
like
multiple instances. It's multiple instances in Mariah's story where Black women came through with a word, with an action, with support. And I was just like, I love to see it. We love to see it. Because normally when you hear these kind of stories, normally they're like, oh, because I was mixed and light skinned, like Black girls hated me. Like that's normally the narrative that you hear. So to finally hear a different narrative where it's like, no, I felt like I got support. It was a really nice change of scenery to finally hear this. And I was like, see, we're not all bad. Like exactly. Some of us got common sense, but
and that's not always the story.
It's not. So it was nice to know that like she even specifically pointed out these moments in her story. And I was like, but then there's Morgan.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Morgan, and then we're going to talk about the dad, and then we're going to talk about her music career. So that's a trajectory.
Yeah, that's the trajectory that we're going right now, because these people were so monumental to her story and they shook us while we were reading. So we have to talk about them.
So from jump, her very earliest memory is Morgan and her dad literally beating the crap out of each other to the point where the cops had to be called because somebody was going to die that day. Okay. So from the beginning, we get the picture of Morgan as being this extremely volatile, violent, again, sociopathic types of behaviors. Like he exhibits those type of like very manipulative, like this goes from 0 to 60, can be extremely charming like a snake and just lure you in before they freaking bite you and poison you. Like Morgan is something else. But above all, she's scared of Morgan for most of her childhood because of how violent he is. And she never wanted to be left alone with him. She remembers one incident in particular where Morgan, after the divorce, when the mom chose Morgan and her, and they were living in this one like apartment that was on top of a shop or something very just poor and bleak.
Something very low budget, but yeah.
Morgan attacked the mom.
Because she said he couldn't use her car.
And shoved her against the wall so hard that she knocked her head on the wall and blacked out. And you have little Mariah. She must have been like, what, 4 or 5 years old?
She said she was like 4 or something like that. And she's like basically wondering if her mom is alive.
So little Mariah has to go take the phone, call the one number she's memorized, which is her friend's mom's number, or her mom's friend's number. And it's like, oh my God, please come. Like, Morgan's hurt mom and I don't know what to do. She's 4. And so the mom's friend calls the cops and the police show up and, you know, they make sure the mom is okay and things like that. And she specifically remembers as she's there huddled in the corner crying and this one cop is trying to console her. She specifically remembers the cops having a conversation with each other and being like, it'll be a miracle if this one makes it.
Right.
Because of how bleak the whole tableau looked, like, just like, damn, it'll be a miracle if this one makes it out. I'm just like, oh God.
It's just so much.
But right there, we understand what Morgan's about.
Right. And then we don't actually hear about Morgan. We don't hear about Morgan until she's about to be famous. Then we hear Morgan show up again. And what we learned about Morgan is that Morgan was actually going to go to jail for being a murder for hire.
Can we talk about this?
So here's the story.
I can't.
A woman hired Morgan and was going to pay him $30,000 to murder her husband and gave him a deposit, which he took, but never actually followed through with the murder. But then the woman killed her husband and claimed self-defense. And he was the key witness to prove that it was not self-defense, but premeditated. So because he was the key witness, they had negotiated that he would not actually go to jail for accepting money to murder someone.
So are we starting to understand Morgan here? We're starting to get a clear picture of his character.
When she said this, I was like, Morgan is crazy.
Morgan is like that batshit crazy family member that you feel like you have to love and accept anyway because they're blood. You know how in the Black
Right.
community we have that thing about, well, that's my family, we're blood, like, and it's kind of like this tribalistic like connection to people when really they're toxic as hell, they're dangerous,
Yes.
and they're horrible people, but you feel like you have to
Horrible.
accept them because they're family and blood. And so that's kind of like the idea that Mariah had about her family members for many years, that oh, you know, their blood, like this is my family, like I have to accept them, I have to try to help them regardless of how horrible they are. She did say that Morgan tried to help her out a little bit in the beginning of her career. She moved out of
He did introduce her to some people and gave her $5,000.
And he gave her a place to stay for a while. She moved out to New York City from Long Island. She was 18 to fully pursue her career and her aspirations of wanting to be a singer. And Morgan was living in some dump, and he let her crash there because he went to Italy to try to be a model. Morgan, who are you, Morgan?
That's what I'm saying. From what she described, Morgan was a very attractive looking man. Like, he could have had prospects, he could have done things, but like and then she also pointed out that he had a lot of issues dealing with his being biracial and being poor and being a black, or being a man where he's black enough to be harassed by the cops, but white enough to not be fully accepted. So he had a lot of built up anger and pain that he was also going through because both of his parents did not think that they was needed to equip to even try to be a beacon of light to this poor child. And it manifested into him just making terrible decisions. I mean, I'm not going to blame all the decisions on his parents, because once you become an adult, you start doing stuff that's on you. And I'm sorry, I never heard of somebody being so angry with their childhood that they become a murder for hire. So just putting it out there.
I think the problem with Morgan is that he desperately needed to let go of the bitterness and the anger that he felt towards his father, and he was never able to do so. And
his father couldn't even do it.
He was never able to do so, even on his deathbed. And so he had so much pent up rage that it caused him to go down a path that was just not the path that he should have gone down. Because again, we talk about how Mariah mentions in the beginning that Morgan was brilliant and he probably would have done amazing things with his life, but that rage and that anger got in the way and derailed him.
And he also became a brilliant criminal.
Yes, instead.
Because he was also a drug dealer.
He was also a drug dealer. I mean, Morgan literally is that villain that is so diabolical. I feel like we were reading a villain origin story. Like, I feel like I don't even understand. Like, I was just like, especially
the thing is
towards the end at what Morgan tries to do to her, Morgan and her mom. Okay.
We have to talk about that separately, because that deserves its own moment. Because I was screaming. I was like, no way, no way. Because I remember during that time when all that happened. We remember. So it was crazy to know the real story behind it. This is like,
because the media painted a whole different picture. But okay, we're jumping way ahead. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about her father.
I'm gonna call it. Can we just quickly talk about her father? Because her father did some things. Okay, so the difference between her father and her mother is that her father gave her memories to carry to her children, and her mother did not.
Yes. Her father gave her joy. He gave her peace. He gave her moments of true connection through his family. His family really embraced her. And there's just one thing that she says her grandmother told her when she was little that literally fueled her entire like drive to want to keep going and become a singer. Her grandmother basically gave her like this, I think it was her grandmother, gave her
a prophecy essentially.
Yeah. And said that she was going to be great essentially. And she held on to that. And that's what kept her going. But her father also just like
gave her food.
Yeah.
He gave her food memories.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
That's how he showed his love, you know?
Yes. It was very clear that was how he did it, because everything else was very meticulous and very like methodical. But when he cooked, he cooked. And I was like, I feel like that was his love for her. I mean, Not to mention, and I'm just gonna briefly say this was that we have to quickly talk about her dad. I am a sucker for daddy stories, but when he was sick and she went to the house and realized that he had been following her career by the post clippings, and I was just like,
I cried. I think it was one of those situations where her father was very proud. And I think where their distance came in was he didn't understand her career choices because he was so logical and he was so methodical that he didn't really understand the whole her wanting to be a singer thing. And I think that's where they had their break, and that's where they kind of drifted apart, because this is something she loved so much and believed in, and she just wanted him to be proud of her and wanted him to support her. And him showing his doubts and his concerns and his skepticism translated to her as a young preteen, teen, early 20s, translated to her as him not caring enough and him not supporting her and him not believing in her. And so I think that's where the fracture began. And then of course he was dealing with his own stuff. She was dealing with her own stuff, especially when she got married to Tommy Mottola. Seems like he really alienated her from her family. That is a whole nother section. We're gonna be here all night.
Listen, okay. So shout out sunflowers for Roy. Sunflowers for Roy. Okay, just sunflowers for Roy. It's something about parents. Like, I understand why our generation is waiting a little bit to have children and trying to make sure that we are mentally ready to have children, because we are trying to break generational curses of creating problems for our children that can only be created by our lack. Mm-hmm. So another definition of that, and the way that she translates that into her children.
Hold on.
Yeah, there's definitely echo. Uh-oh.
All right. I think it's gone.
Okay, so we have a question. What did you think of the dynamic with her step grandma versus her grandma? And I said, which one? And she said, her dad's mother seemed to be less affectionate than her dad's stepmother, who she seemed to prefer. And I actually think that that's a direct correlation to why he is the way that he is.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I've noticed a lot, and especially in Black families, is that, and it's something that we're recognizing now and trying to break, but we do have a tendency to be a little bit less affectionate. Mm-hmm. Because it's supposed to be tough love. We're going to get you through life because this is like, they're not going to treat you better than this, that kind of thing. So I do think that there is I do think that there was a correlation between that, but you're right. She did prefer the stepmother, but I think that's because Mariah was literally begging for love, affection, and security her whole life and her whole childhood.
Also, you have to remember that the grandfather divorced the mother, the grandma, and then married this other woman and had a gang of kids with her.
Oh,
so
yeah.
She probably felt some type of way, like, okay, you divorced me and left me and my son, and then go marry this other hoe over here and had a whole plethora of kids, and you just went on like a whole happy family. You think it's going to be cool, and you think I'm going to let my son go over there? Damn. That's probably what was going through her mind.
Again, there was more adult issues that trickled down to the children.
Basically. So I can literally see her being like, no. Mm-mm.
Well, so I will say that Mariah embodies a level, I'm not even going to call it hustle culture, because back in the 80s and 90s, to be discovered musically, you had to do what she did.
Yeah.
Like, there wasn't social media, there's not YouTube or anything that was going to get her where she needed to go.
What is happening?
I don't know. Your other thing popped up and went crazy.
Oh, my computer is working now.
Yeah. I was like, wait, let me fix. Sorry, guys. Oh my gosh, you bring up a very good point. It's crazy how the cycle keeps trickling down, because look at her and Nick. Yo, side note, Nick just announced that he got another baby mama and his baby number 7 when he just announced that they had the birth of the twins earlier this week.
He has a lot of kids.
Nick and Future are literally trying to compete for pull out less.
Hold on. I need to switch to my computer because my phone's about to die.
Okay. Well, I will remove you from this while you switch.
Okay.
And we will be here. So we're going to just briefly give you an overview. Mariah had this drive unlike anybody else that like ever. She did so much. And she even did it to the point where like she knew that she was doing this for a means to an end. And she just never broke that cycle. And for some reason, like I know that we don't praise hustle culture. And technically what Mariah did was hustle culture, but Mariah was also super driven. Like she knew what she was going to do. She was not going to veer off from it. Like she was going to do just that. Like there was no difference, no nothing. Ready, Oshley? Oh,
yes.
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I was talking about how like, I know we don't glorify hustle culture, but Mariah, I don't even consider what she did hustle culture. I really consider like she knew what she wanted and she knew what she had to do to get there. And she did everything in her power to make that freaking happen, down to wearing her mom's hand-me-down shoes that were too little to the point where the sole had disconnected from the shoe. And she was still trying to do it. Like
that was one of my favorite parts in the autobiography because we clearly got to see, because, you know, you hear about the great Mariah Carey, you know, if you grew up as a millennial, you really heard her music, you kind of saw her rise to fame and her incredible voice, and she's one of the greats. And you kind of see it from the outside as a fan or just a regular person. And what I really enjoyed about this autobiography was because we saw her childhood and because we saw how she came up, we kind of saw how music was her saving grace. Like music was all she had. She talks about how she didn't have a safe place, a safe person. She didn't have security. She didn't have anyone she could count on. She didn't feel like she had a family that she could really rely on. So you can imagine she put everything into music because she was like, I have to make it because I don't have anything else. Like I have to make it so I can get myself to a safe place, basically. And that's kind of what was driving her, was her passion for music. And it makes sense because for her to have achieved the levels that she's achieved, the heights, the greatness, you have to put out your all into it. You can't have distractions. You have to be in the studio 24/7. You have to be training all the time. There is no plan B. Like, we saw that because she literally
was all or nothing from the very beginning.
She was living on $1 a day in the studio all the time.
Had to decide if she wanted to either take the subway or get a bagel.
Like, for real. Like you said, wearing her mom's shoes that had like a hole in winter and all the
snow. They were too small for her feet.
Too small for her. Like taking odd jobs, like doing background vocals and doing like the humble stuff that you do in the music industry before you make it, and just being grateful and making connections. And it was so, this part of the novel was so amazing because it was kind of, to me, it was kind of like a love story to New York.
Yeah.
Like, as a former New Yorker, like I really enjoyed seeing that. And it was also kind of like cool to see everybody before they were big, like Will Smith.
Oh yeah, how she casually mentioned when Will Smith was doing Parents Just Don't Understand. I was like, dang, y'all did come up around the same time. That's crazy.
And to see like Puff, as he was called back then, or P. Diddy when he was just starting Bad Boy, to see
apparently when he was just an intern and then he left and pissed off all the corporate white men.
Yes. And just like, and ooh, that moment she had with Tupac.
Okay, wait. I have to talk about that point because
oh my gosh.
So those who don't know, there's a moment where she's walking to her dressing room and there's this white limo that's like driving really slow and she has no idea who the person is. And then he rolls down his window and it's Tupac Shakur just like, I guess, giving her the eye or something. And he's
the way she described him though.
I know, she described him like the Adonis of Adonises. And then all he said was, hey, Mariah.
I was like,
you know what this reminds me of? Have you seen Into the Spider-Verse, the animated movie?
Mm-mm.
okay, there's a scene where he's trying to teach his, like, Miles is with his uncle, and he's like, I like this girl, but I don't know what to do. He's like, all you got to do is just do this. And he's like, he puts his hand on his shoulder, and he's like, hey. And I was like, for some reason, that gave me the same vibe where I'm like,
that's amazing. It was so good because she was like his beautiful chocolatey skin and his piercing brown eyes. I was like,
you described him like a dessert.
She really did. And I was just gagging because I was like, I was racking through my brain before she said his name, like trying to figure out who it could possibly be. And then she was like, Tupac Shakur. I literally screamed out loud, and I was walking around my neighborhood at the time, so that was a poor moment to scream because
I was literally like, when she did, I was like, oh my God.
And you could just tell how much she treasured that moment in her life, like, because
she really, the way that she read it off, it was like she was telling her homegirls, like, listen, there was this one time, like, Tupac Shakur said hey to me, and you don't understand, girl. Like, he was in a limo and he pulled the window down and he looked so good. Like, that is how she told the story to me. And like, I mean, I know what Tupac looks like, but like, I imagine him being even finer. It was like, oh, he was fine when he was in that limo.
We were there with her in that moment, feeling her awe, her joy, and her like girlish delight. Like, we were there. Okay, she took us there. But so let's talk about Tommy Mottola.
So Tommy Mottola groomed her, abused her, and manipulated her into being with him. Let's just call it what it is, because he knew.
He met her when she was 17 or 18, and they met at a party where it was like kind of like an industry party. And she
keep in mind, if she was 18, he was already in his. He was 40s. 20 years older than her. He was already in his 40s.
Yeah. So the way they met, as she describes it, is an industry party. She got an invite because she knew people in the industry, kind of.
She was with her friend.
She was making connections in the industry. And she had her demo tape. Like, she worked really hard on her demo, and she had it with her at all times. And she said she was walking up the stairs to go to the bathroom or something, and he was walking down the stairs. And they made eye contact. And she says it's nothing like she's ever felt before. Like, this weird energy went through her body. And I was like, oh, you mean his demonic possession? I'm like,
oh, it's like, dang, in hindsight, you just, he's crazy.
Right. And she just said she had never felt anything like that. She didn't describe it as like, it wasn't like a sexual thing or anything.
She didn't describe it as romantic at all. It's like any interaction with Tommy, she never described as romantic.
The part that makes me really sad is, well, he obviously likes what he saw, even though she didn't see it that way because he's old. But She didn't know he was Tommy Mottola, who was a big name at the time. She didn't know who he was. She clearly finds out who he is later, and she's about to give her demo tape to another record executive, and he literally snatches it out of that guy's hand and like just walks off. And she's just like, the fuck? And then she finds out it's Tommy Mottola, and then he calls her later, and then everything starts rolling, and that's how it all begins. And she says that from the beginning, it was like a business relationship that somehow became a relationship. And she says it like she doesn't really quite understand how it happened. It just happened.
It's just such a weird power. It was a power thing. It was like, could she really say no to the man that was giving her her dreams?
No. I guess the part that made me sad is another thing that we really find out in this autobiography is how like prudish and chaste Mariah was, because her sister getting knocked up at 15, she just never wanted that to be her. And because of her parents' divorce, she was really like gun shy of relationships. So she just wasn't really concerned with men or boys or relationships or dating.
Wasn't at all. She said she had a dream and they were not about to ruin it for her.
Yeah, she wasn't about to be derailed. And so the part that makes me sad is that her first sexual relationship is with Tommy Mottola. And she says it was never like, she was never sexually attracted to him. It was never like this big sweeping romance where he swept her off her feet or anything like that. It was literally a business relationship that became a sexual relationship. And he somehow isolated her from everyone and manipulated her into thinking that she would be nothing without him. And that he loved her and that he wanted to marry her and give her this beautiful life. And so she just fell into it because she's 18. She doesn't have any previous experience with men. She's never really dated. She's never really done anything.
This man was going to give her something that her mom said was a good thing. He had money.
Her mom was behind it. Her mom was like, this is great.
Yep.
He's going to take care of you.
$30 million mansion.
Can we talk about Sing Sing?
I'm about to say a third, like y'all have seen pictures of Mariah's old house. Like just Google it, guys. Like Sing Sing is amazing. Like it looked amazing. Like
I will say that one smart thing that I didn't realize she did. So she calls it Sing Sing, which obviously Sing Sing is the name of a prison in upstate New York, but she called it Sing Sing because she said she felt like a prisoner in that home. But it was interesting because I did not know that she put down half the money for that.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I thought it was Tommy Mottola's
She said
house.
she didn't want it to be his home. She wanted it to be their home. And I was like, preach. Because he can't put you out of a house that you paid for, sis.
Yes.
I was like, you know what, Mariah? You didn't do a lot of smart stuff when it came to Tommy, but like that move was so smart because...
But the part that had me shook was the fact that he had surveillance cameras all over the house.
Everywhere except the bathroom.
Everywhere except the bathroom and I think her shoe closet or something.
Yeah.
Everywhere else there was cameras. He was always monitoring her to the point where she would literally get up in the middle of the night to go downstairs to get a snack. And the intercom would come on and he'd be like, what are you doing? That's how closely he was watching her at all times. She couldn't go anywhere without her bodyguards that were for her safety, but really were all on his payroll and reported to him everything that she did. So she basically had handlers. She had like, you know how everyone talks about like the music industry and how they had handlers? She had legit handlers, okay?
24/7.
24/7.
Like the control was so bad. His therapist had to negotiate her to go out for a night with friends. She is in her early 20s and cannot go out because he is so crazy and so manipulative and so controlling that his therapist had to negotiate one night for Mariah to go out. Like, what?
And here's the thing. I still think she left out a lot of stuff because
I do too.
She talked about how she was afraid of him. And she talked about like, how she would rebel against him and like little things, or she would talk back and she'd be like, I knew I would be punished for that. I think he abused her physically.
I do believe, because the way that she said that he talked to her, like it's very clear that she left out some things. I don't know if that was just for her because it might just be hard to talk about because it did sound like she got choked up on certain scenes when she was reading. So,
well, I looked up Tommy Mottola today and he's married to this singer, Tamia, this Mexican singer named Tamia. He's been married to her for 17 years.
He's married to Tamia?
They've been married for 17 years and they have 2 children together. So I think that's why she left out that stuff. And when her book came out in October of 2020, Tommy Mottola made a statement and said that essentially
he's glad to have been some vital part of her story or some shit. I saw that.
He's sorry for any pain that he could have possibly caused her, blah, 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 blah. So what I take that to look like is because even Mariah was like too nice to her family. Like,
yes,
she didn't really go there like she could have. She didn't really peel it back. Like she still talked about them with a layer of love over it, even while talking about all the horrific things that they did to her. Yes. And the way she talked about Tommy, I could read between the lines because there were certain things that she would say. I'd be like, this man was beating your ass. He had to have been because you were so afraid of him. And
her name was Talia.
Was it Talia? Maybe it is Talia.
Yeah.
It must be Talia.
Also, now I have to go back and rewatch the It's Like That music video. Where she has the Sony TV cameras and the old man she said to Mary watching her all around the house.
Yes.
Listen, every single time, I have gone back and started re-listening to her music. Yes. And like everything is hitting different. Now I gotta go back and watch the music videos because man. But
it's Talia. It's Talia, not Tamia. Sorry.
Yeah. So I know we want to talk about Tommy, right? I know we can keep talking about Tommy, but the part that I've been waiting to get to is the Derek Jeter part.
Okay, we can
because when I tell you,
shook,
would not have guessed,
shook
at all.
Also, I thought he was Puerto Rican. I had no idea he was biracial.
I had no idea he was half Irish, half black. I'm like, first of all, don't know what Derek Jeter's, what type of kisses he was giving her, but
she was gone.
She She stated that all they did was kiss. And I was like, the fact that she has never had any other romantic.
It's so sad.
Thing, but at the same time, the way that she told the story was so adorable.
It's so pure, isn't it?
Yeah, it was so like, pure. Wow, like, girl, you were shook.
It was shook. Like the way he treated her, and I think it was the first time she'd ever been genuinely wanted by someone. Like he said that he had been interested in her for a long time, and he had been trying to meet her for a long time, and he'd been talking to his people like, yo, like, I want to meet Mariah. And
right.
He had this infatuation with her before they even met. And the way they met, it was literally like one of those things out of a movie. Like they were at dinner with a whole bunch of other people. She wasn't paying him no mind until she found out that he had a white Irish mother and a black father, just like her. And
because she's been craving that connection with somebody for so long.
Literally never met anyone like her before in that way. And she instantly was drawn to him after that. And of course, they had great conversations and the chemistry was there and they were flirting. Keep in mind, she's still married to Tommy Mottola at the time. And this is towards the end of their marriage when things have just gone all to hell and they're in couples counseling, but it's not working. And Derek just gave her, she says Derek gave her the courage to leave. Like he gave her that
a reason to leave.
A reason to leave and a push to be like, there's something else out there for you. Like your life is not over. Like you can feel like this. And when I tell you, I will never listen to the Butterfly album the same ever again in my life. Like I was listening to some of the songs and
I've already gone back. I've already gone back and listened to Give My All, and I was like, you wrote this about kissing Derek
Jeter.
Girl, what kind of kiss was that? Because he lit your life up.
Wow. It was so cute. And I don't know, it was so pure and innocent, like how they stood on the rooftop and just made out.
Oh my gosh.
The way they had to have a whole stealth operation to get her to that rooftop.
Because even though he allowed her to go out, she still had to go out with his security who was reporting back to him.
Tommy Mottola, there is a special place in hell. I want to believe that he's a better person now since he was
I really do, because those kids do not deserve that craziness.
And has 2 children, and for their sakes and for his wife's sake, I really want to believe he's a better person now, but this is
really want to. But which also, before we jump parts, can we talk about how Mariah had invited Jermaine Dupri,
this
the brat,
crazy, to her house.
Wasn't it somebody else?
I can't remember. I only remember Jermaine Dupri and DeBrat, and she invited them to her house with their people, I guess, to record the remix of what song was it?
I don't remember the song. I forgot. DeBrat was on a couple songs with Mariah. Well, yeah. And then also, while we're trying to figure this out, the main reason remember how we used to talk about how, like, you know, Mariah stay doing remixes, bro. She stay remixing. Turns out, Escape. Yes. Thank you, Raymond. It was Escape. The reason that she did, it was the Always Be My Baby remix. Come through, Raymond, with the facts. Okay.
Okay.
She did so many remixes because Tommy did not want her to be too urban. I was like, and the way that she always kept saying, he don't want me to be urban, aka black. And I was like,
the fact that Tommy Mottola just wanted to ignore the black side of Mariah really had me heated. Like the way
that she fought that by making remixes and bringing on the blackity black people, I was like, I look at your remixes differently now too.
She would do it anyway. She'd be like, I mean, this is where the music industry is going, like hip hop. Like I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. Sorry. And
but the fact that she had to pull DeBrat into her shoe closet to ask her if she wanted to go get some fries.
So sad, y'all.
And then they held Dupri at gunpoint to figure out where she went. And all they were doing was sitting at a Burger King eating fries. And DeBrat, who was 19.
Jermaine was in his early 20s.
Yeah, they were all babies.
They were kids. Yeah.
And DeBrat was like, you got to get out. Like, this is crazy. Like, there's no reason that, like, you had to plan an escape to get Burger King fries.
Like, that's a level of surveillance that is just unconscionable. Like, he literally traumatized her to the point where I still think she's dealing with the effects of that to this day. And so many things make sense now, because I remember right when Mariah, like around the time where she was getting out of her marriage to Tommy, her image changed drastically. I remember this because she started wearing those tiny, tiny little clothes.
They're really cute, like, oh, I'm going to be the darling outfit.
But here's the thing, I understand it now because
I do
for
too.
so long, she was never allowed to really live that like early 20s life. She was married in her early 20s from 18 to like what? She was with him for 8 years. So she was married for a long time. And she was never allowed to, or not necessarily married to him for a long time, but they were together for a while and then they got married.
Yeah.
But she was never allowed to have like that experience that so many of us have of being like young and like in your late teens, early 20s, discovering yourself, like living life, like finding out
free and random. Like I have so many random 20-year memories of doing stupid stuff, but it was so much fun and I will never change that.
And she never got to have those experiences. And so of course, when she finally escapes Sing Sing, escapes Tommy, she's living it up. She's living her best life. She's wearing the teeniest dresses she can find, darling. She is
fact
living.
That when she finalized the divorce, she flew to Dominican Republic because it could be finalized that day, just so that she could continue. She could get her hot girl Tampa moment. I was like,
and then flew to Derek's house.
Flew straight to Derek's house. Listen, I looked up Derek. Obviously, at this point, I was like, I was young when Derek Jeter was in his prime, so I didn't really pay attention to Derek. But Miss WOC Reader is right. He pulled. He pulled, and he was real cute too. Like real cute. So he was pulling, and apparently he was a sweetheart. So. Oh, and then also how she talked about how, like, though their romance was short, he showed her that an interracial family can be beautiful and can be healthy. And she really relationship with his family. I was like,
she really needed to see it.
She did.
She needed to see genuine love in an interracial couple. She needed to see it.
Yeah, it's just like, but like, if you guys aren't sure, go look up Derek Jeter in the 1990s. You'll thank me.
He was hot.
He was cute. I was like, oh, I see why you flew to the Dominican Republic and then got right back on the jet and flew straight to him, sis. I see what you did there and I approve. I mean, that's some true blue, I am very young in my 20s moves.
Yes.
But when you're a millionaire and you do it, I mean, I don't know. That whole scene, I was like proud in a way. It was like, you left him and you got some good. You got some good that was so inspirational. It changed your whole mood in your albums to where it was very noticeable that your style has changed and how you were singing was changed. You were no longer singing about fictional romance stories. Like you were singing about what you were doing. Like,
my favorite part was how salty Tommy was. And he was like, you seem very inspired lately. She was like, Sorry.
I was like, and now we have Salty Tommy. Because Salty Tommy, that was the mean. Oh, and the scene where she said that she was going to try to have a rom-com moment and like went downstairs to cook and all he had was 3 eggs. And that's how she met his sister.
Yes.
I was like, this is the type of 20-year-old shenanigans that I'm talking about.
That's a real moment.
This is real. Like, this is a real honest moment. And I was just like, I really, really just, like, again, still shook that it was Derek Jeter who became the inspiration. Like, go back and listen to I Give My All.
And Rooftop.
Understanding that it is about Derek Jeter on the rooftop.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a totally different inspiration. Like I've obviously I love her music, but going back and listening to the music that she specifically talked about in her book, I was like, this is so amazing. Like you really wrote a book. You wrote a song about how you wanted to be with someone else while still married to Tommy. And he never picked up on it until after you got that good and came out with that other song.
Right. And there was nothing he could do.
Brava. Like
that is a boss move.
Right.
It was so interesting to see like the behind the scenes of all of the writing of her albums, what certain songs meant and how certain albums encapsulated certain like times in her life and what she was going through. And it was really beautiful to see just how much she loves her fans and how her fans have given her so much strength over the
And
years.
how many times she thanked the lambs. I was like, you make it very clear that like the lambs did this. Like you were here, but the lambs did this for you.
I thought that was beautiful. Like that relationship Mariah Carey has with her fans is unlike, I think it's very unique, I think, to a star that's as big as she is. I feel like there's very few stars that I can think of who have that same similar deep bond with their fans. I can't think of many, honestly. I think of people who have kind of like a fake type of relationship with their fans, but still at a distance. But she literally would like send them voicemails. She would like communicate.
She hangs up the ornaments that they send her on her Christmas tree.
Yes. She would like go on her website and send them messages, like voice memos of how she was feeling at the time, if she was feeling down, if she was feeling happy. Like she just had a very close relationship with her fans. And I think it's because she didn't really have anyone. Like Mariah Carey outside.
Oh, remember that scene where she was talking about how she was going to perform and she couldn't figure out why the road was blocked off? And then it was the realization that it was because of her.
Yes.
She heard them screaming her name and how she just couldn't believe it.
It was after her first album, and Tommy had kept her so isolated that she didn't even realize how huge of a star she was.
Right. Like I was like, you took that away from her too, bro? Also, again, I kind of wish we could find the Cribs episode because, but like you remember her house on Cribs?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that because I was shook. I was like, that's your house? That's a compound. It was humongous. But man, it's just like, oh, dang, we talked about Cribs. Let's talk about her glitter era.
That was so crazy to see from an insider's perspective because the way the media made her look during that whole time, they made her look crazy.
And we all thought she was crazy.
We thought she was losing her mind.
Yeah.
And she had no idea.
You remember that TRL episode.
Look.
Because we all watched TRL back then, religiously.
All I can say now is Carson, you could have prevented all of this.
Carson, choke on an orange lime. Choke on an orange peel.
Prevented all of this.
Because she's very correct. She did not just roll up on TRL. It was very planned out because it required planning. So you really mean to tell me Carson didn't know? You really mean to tell me Carson didn't know?
Was he just not in on it? Like, did he arrive late that day? And
did he work for Tommy?
Ooh, girl. Did
That's the first thought that I had. I was like, how do you not know? You the host of the show. They don't do actual surprises.
But here's the weird thing. On TV, you do everything to cover up the awkwardness. If it's not going right as the host, you literally fall over yourself to cover that up and to try to get it going. So the fact that he just left her out there to dry and he did not banter with her, he did not pick up on her cues, is very interesting. It's weird. And you know what? He made a statement about it. I think when she came out with her, because the memoir has been out since last year, October time.
Oh, well, did he make a comment?
I think so. I didn't read it because I was so annoyed that I was like, I don't even want to know.
Yeah, I was very much like, so Carson, come sit down. Let's have a talk. Did you set Mariah Carey up that day?
I think he did. Because Glitter already didn't do well in the box office. It was panned, and
I mean, in a way, it wasn't her fault. It came out 9/11 weekend.
It came out 9/11 weekend. She wasn't allowed to do the original script. It had changed so much. She was going through a divorce.
Tommy was bitter.
And he was bitter, so he wasn't letting things flow organically. So the movie, essentially what it sounded like is the movie was sabotaged.
It does. That movie was sabotaged.
It was sabotaged. And she had no choice but to go through with it anyway. And then it was panned by critics, and then 9/11 weekend and all this kind of stuff. And then she was supposed to release the album. And they wanted her to like add some stuff to the album. And she literally was so stressed that she wasn't sleeping. So she was delirious. You know, when you haven't slept for over 2 to 3 days, you start to become delirious and you start to kind of like lose your mind a little bit.
Right.
And that's what she was going through. And then she did that TRL thing that went bad. So she was stressed from that. And then she wasn't sleeping and she just wanted to rest and nobody would let her rest. And there was nowhere for her to go. And it was in this moment in the book that I realized that celebrities are really trapped. Because the fact that you have nobody on your side, nobody, and that's why the celebrities who actually have family that they can trust are better off, because you can go to your family and your family won't tell anyone where you are. They'll protect you. They'll hide you. They'll tell your handlers. They'll tell your assistants. They'll tell your record label. They'll tell your managers, your publicists. Oh, I haven't heard from them. I don't know where they are, when they're trying to hunt you down. But she didn't even have that because her family sold her out.
And then remember, the one person that she had was Tot, one of her background dancers, who tried, but somebody found out she was in Brooklyn. However, I do need to take a side note. The Glitter soundtrack is bomb.com. It is.
Like, it's so good. And
it was literally overshadowed by a horrific event and Tommy's bitter ass. Like,
I want to rewatch Glitter because I'm like,
I do too. And now I want to rewatch it because I never watched Glitter when I was younger.
I didn't see it either. I just heard the bad reviews and I was like,
yeah, my parents were like, we're not going to see it. Like, because it was a lot of us. They wouldn't finna pay for all of us to go see a bad movie. So we didn't get to go see it. But like, I just think of like her detailing how quickly the media like dove onto her and just
my God. Can we talk about the shade?
Okay. I was trying to lead into this. I was like, so can we, Tommy?
He said,
this is why it's hard for me to believe that Tommy is a changed man. Okay. This is why it's hard for me to believe Tommy is a changed man, because Mariah was writing songs, because Mariah was trying to get out of Sony.
Yes.
And he was trying to sabotage her so bad. She was writing songs and he was giving them to other people. And I was like, who the hell is he giving it to? Who the hell is he giving it to? And then I read an article that said it was J-Lo. And I was like, so at what point are we going to call J-Lo out for doing all of this destruction of Black women? When are we going to call J-Lo out?
Here's the thing.
I
knew it was J-Lo right away. Because Mariah
was J-Lo right away?
Yeah, because Mariah has this famous thing where she says, I don't know her, right? There's this interview where they asked her about J-Lo and she says, I don't know her. And it went viral, right? And that's like a joke, right? So in the audiobook, she says, he gave the song to someone I don't know. I didn't even
realize that. Oh my God.
That's the shade that she threw. And then when she talks about the Glitter soundtrack and how good it was and how justice for Glitter and how Glitter was trending because the Lambs made it go #1, all this stuff, she goes, now I'm real. You know that Jennifer Lopez song, I'm real, what you see, look. I was getting my whole entire life.
First of all, again, the audiobook gave me a level of joy that I can't but I cannot believe I did not put 2 and 2 together until you brought up that.
I was screaming. She was like, first of all, I don't know. I still don't know her.
I also want to know which songs went to J-Lo that were supposed to be hers. I really want to know. J-Lo has a history because Diddy made Dark Child, Shantae Moore's single. Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm. I remember that. Also, Diddy, we're not going to talk about how Diddy screws over his artists.
She did. She took a lot of music from Ashanti and background vocals from Ashanti.
I'm about to say, every time we thought J-Lo was singing, Ashanti was singing. like even in her on her albums where we thought J-Lo was singing, it's actually Ashanti's voice singing. Because they took like the demo track that Ashanti recorded of the song and just kept her vocals on it.
Yes.
Because J-Lo couldn't hit them notes.
She couldn't. And that's why I was screaming so hard when I was listening to the audiobook. When she goes, now I'm real. I was like, mic fucking drop. Again. Nobody ever knew why she was so salty about J-Lo, because they literally asked her about J-Lo and she said, I don't know her. And nobody understood. And so she got dragged a little bit because they were like, why are you so mean to J-Lo?
I mean, but we all thought that she was just being, because you remember, like, we didn't know all of this stuff that happened to her. So we were like, okay, remember, Mariah is a little crazy. She is a little diva. She is all this. I mean, this is like, Mariah was done wrong. And Mariah could have dragged J-Lo in that very instance and did not. That's way classier than what I would have been, because I'd have called her out and Tommy. Well, I mean, That's who Tommy was giving my songs to.
Oh,
I would have done all of that because what?
Oh, it was brilliance. It was brilliance how she did it. I was like,
I'm so happy about that. Oh my
of it
gosh.
all.
Darling, that is amazing.
I was getting my whole life. I was getting my whole life. But anyways, moving right along. So yeah, so the part where she goes to her mom's house to try to get sleep.
Let's preface this part first. So Mariah has been going 0 to 100 the moment her music career started. And she talks about how important it is that when you are going as hard as you're going, it is important to also schedule you into what you're doing. And simple things like hydrating, saving or resting your voice, eating well, resting. And she said this, and it leads to the point where she has finally hit a rock where her body cannot continue anymore, because she even did an example about how she finished a music shoot at 3:00 in the morning and was doing a press conference at 5.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was doing things that were extremely unhealthy. And she kept saying she didn't have a team. She didn't have a team. She didn't have a team to like keep her together. She didn't have a team. And it's just like, you think about these kind of things and you think about people like, I'm going to use Beyonce as an example. Like, we know Beyonce has a very large team now. And we also know Beyonce is not afraid to be like, so I just stopped because I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
But like back then, Mariah couldn't, because she was also trying to prove to Tommy that she could be something without him, because he kept saying that she was going to die in the decade and that she wasn't going to be anything after, especially after him, because like she's going to just, you know, she's going to be a part of that decade. So she had so much to prove. And then with the new label dropping all the money that they dropped on her deal,
the biggest deal in history at that point.
Right. And then they were just like, we want our return on our investment. And all she wanted was to go to sleep. And no one, well, Todd tried. I will give Todd that. This scene makes me so mad. Her telling this makes me so angry.
It just exposes how she had no one. Because like I said, celebrities,
and how the industry treats their big people.
Celebrities who have family they can trust, like you go to your mama house, your grandma house, they're not going to tell on you. They're going to unplug the phone and tell everybody that comes calling. They don't know where you are at. Sorry.
And let the record company roll up to your house, roll up to your mama house demanding you come out.
Good luck.
I wish somebody would roll up on my mama house.
Exactly. Because you have a mom that cares. But that just goes to show how much Mariah didn't have anyone. She didn't even have friends that she could really rely on to go to like that. So she was really alone. And she went to her mom's house that she bought. So really, it's her house.
Before this part, her brother and her mother showed up at her hotel door with the record label demanding that she record a video. And her brother immediately manipulates her.
And keep in mind, she's not in her right mind. She hasn't slept in days. She's delirious. She's tired. She's at the end of her rope. She's about to snap. And so she's not in her right facilities. And her brother basically just she starts screaming, right? Because she's just fed up. She starts screaming. And her brother gets her to stop screaming by bringing up a childhood, like, inside joke.
Yes.
And so in that moment, she just latches onto that because she doesn't have anyone, right? She's just like, I have nobody I can trust. And so her brother bringing up that childhood joke, she latches onto him and is like, okay, my brother will help me. My brother will save me. My brother will get me to a place where I can sleep and help me get to a place of stability. And so she then goes, so she's trusting her brother now, right? So it's opened up that door. So then she goes to her mom's house, which is really her house because she bought her mom a house and decorated it and everything. And she goes over there thinking she'll be able to get some sleep. And she goes over there with Tots, who was her background singer, dancer.
Slash
friend. And her nephew's over there too, because she was living with her mom. And she goes into the room and she just manages to fall asleep when her mom wakes her up with the same old bullshit about recording the video and all this other stuff. And she just loses it. She finally just snaps. Like, she was at the end of her rope. She was about to snap. She finally just snaps. She starts going in on her mom, She starts telling her mom about herself. She starts dragging her mama. She's just done. And the mom
What
does
does the mom do?
she becomes a Karen.
Weaponizes her whiteness.
She becomes a Karen and she calls the police on her child.
And then, but Mariah said that that's what her mom did. Like whenever her siblings came at her mom, she called the cops on them. Whenever like she didn't like what was being happened, she called the cops. Like, and then she even stated that like she prided herself and knew that as a white woman, like she could call the cops and get what she wanted. To weaponize your whiteness against your own children.
Shook. That is a level of, I don't even want to go into it because it's going to make me too angry. So she calls the cops on Mariah. At this point, I'm literally listening to the story with my jaw open.
I was like this.
I was completely disgusted. The cops come and they recognize that she's Mariah Carey, but not even being Mariah Carey trumps her mother's whiteness, and they take her away. Yes, you heard me. They take her mother away in the back of a cop car.
No, they take Mariah away in the cop car, and her brother gets in the car with her.
Y'all.
Like it's a taxi.
Can't make this shit up. So Morgan's next to her now, and Morgan convinces her to go to this place that he knows about because she's
That's
like,
a spa.
Y'all, it's not a spa.
It's not.
It's a mental.
Remember when the news reported that Mariah Carey had been signed into a mental health facility and that she had had a breaking point and like she was crazy and all this other stuff? That was all orchestrated by her brother.
Yep.
Because I guess they thought that they were going to Britney Spears her.
Yes. They thought that they were going to make it seem like she wasn't stable because remember she had just signed the biggest record, like the biggest deal, financial record deal up until that point in the music industry ever. It was like over 200 million. So she couldn't see all this though, right? Because you think Mariah,
she said in like a span of a week, she'd only slept for 2 hours. She was done.
So she goes into this place thinking it's a spa. She quickly realizes it's not a spa because they put her in sounds like a padded cell. Yes. And she just hears like really disturbing things throughout the night, and she can't leave and she can't go, and she's trying to sleep but she can't. And
the doctor was a jerk.
This is the part that broke me though. She said that she was so scared. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know why she was there. She didn't know where her purse was. She didn't know how she was going to leave. She didn't have her phone. She didn't have nothing. She couldn't call anyone. She couldn't, like, my heart broke for her. Like, to be this huge superstar and to be reduced to a place where you have nothing and nobody and no one is willing to help you. Everyone's just taking advantage of you. It was sad. And she said that's what her spirit broke in that moment. And she tried to sign herself out in the morning. She realized very quickly she could not.
Yeah. So she doesn't know what her brother said to them so that she was not able to come out. Like her brother did this to her.
And then when she goes to talk to like, I guess the like head of the facility to explain her situation, he basically condescends to her and takes great pleasure in like humiliating her and is like
talking about you should probably be humble. I would have came across that table.
Yes.
I would have been instated for real because I would have came across that table.
Oh, sounds like you're just having a diva moment. You need to humble yourself and all this bullshit. Long story short, she eventually manages to leave that place. I don't remember how, but she does. I don't think she remembers how either. Her memories seem very hazy because remember, she was incredibly sleep deprived.
So, yeah, remember now, didn't they force her to take some pills or something?
Y'all, the abuse in this, it's so traumatizing. Like, I didn't even go through this and I'm traumatized. And so she eventually manages to leave and she's still trying to figure out what to do, where to go. And Morgan convinces her to go to LA. Is this when he convinces her to go to LA?
Yes, he convinces her to go to this place in LA that's good.
It's going to be good for you, sis. I promise. I'm going to take care of you, sis. You'll be able to sleep. So she goes to this place in LA and it's literally wash, rinse, and repeat. Like it's the same shit that she just escaped from.
He's just determined to put her.
Morgan's another one.
I mean, and that's when she started calling them her ex-brother and her ex-sister. Like, because after all of this, she does actually start seeking real therapy. And Miss WOC readers, right? She does learn that she's bipolar. But then also she starts learning how to deal with her family. And this is the perfect thing where I'd be like, blood is thicker than water is bullshit.
Yes.
Your family is who you choose.
Yes.
Because what they did to her, it's just phenomenally terrible. It just gets, it was like listening to it. I know it wasn't happening to me, but it was such a horrible experience.
It was traumatizing
to listen to.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I mean, the only way she was able to escape that facility was because 9/11 happened.
Yes.
And so they let her go because 9/11 happened. And I guess that was a bigger story. And that was a bigger thing for people to be worried about. And can you imagine? She's away from home. She's a native New Yorker. She's terrified.
Her brother set her up again.
She's like, oh my God, the world is ending. So she finds a way to get back to New York, and she finally gets to a real spa, gets sleep, gets her facilities together, gathers herself, and like Brittany says, seeks out a therapist and really gets help and really starts to unpack everything that's just happened and realize that they literally almost broke her and killed her spirit by orchestrating this whole thing, because she starts to find out, I believe, at some point she goes back to her mom's house. It's not Pat's house. Okay. Mariah Carey bought the house, but whatever. She goes back there and there's paparazzi, and like Pat is
ready to take a picture of her and stuff. And
Pat is on the porch, like she's playing jacks or something, just acting like nothing is happening. And it's very clear that it was a setup, because the media has been reporting on the story the whole time. They're giving details. It's like, how would they know this stuff? So clearly her mom and her brother orchestrated all of this, set her up, and then sold her out to the tabloids to make her look crazy, because they were trying to get control of her money. Because Mariah explains that from the minute her career took off, they kept coming up with all these schemes trying to get money from her, even though she was supporting them, even though she was giving them money, even though she bought her mom a house and she was basically supporting her mom.
Never enough.
It was never enough. And then when she did that huge record deal, it was almost like they saw her as a cash cow, is basically what she realized.
Yes.
And like Brittany said, that's when she realized that she needs to reframe the way that she saw them, because this whole time she's looking at them as family members that she's
begging them to be real family members.
And she had to disconnect that, and she had to create new boundaries, because family members that love you do not try to set you up to get you locked up in a mental institution so that they can claim that you're mentally unstable, so they can become the executors of your will. Like this is just not something that good family members that love you would do. Like, it's just not something.
It's a lot. It was just like,
oh God, it just exposes like what wealth and fame can do to the people around you.
Yes. But also, I was old enough to remember her quote unquote mental breakdown.
Oh, it was
and
bad.
How quickly I took what the media said and brandished her as a crazy diva. And I was just like, dang. And she never tried to correct the narrative until right now.
Until now. And it's interesting because Mariah talks about how when you're an incredible singer, they try to downplay your talent, and I always knew that Mariah wrote her songs, but I didn't realize it until I was older, because when we were growing up, that was never emphasized. And now looking back and realizing that she wrote all of her music, and she's just incredibly talented writer, that was never emphasized. And so
no, it wasn't.
And she, it's weird because it's like she never really set the record straight, because she just wanted to let the music speak for itself and move on. And she talks about how now in the era of social media, artists finally have their own platform so that they can kind of diffuse things that the media tries to say, and they can tell their own story, and they can change the narrative themselves. And she was saying back then, we didn't have that mouthpiece. We didn't have that platform. So whatever the media said is what it was. And she was being hunted down by paparazzi, and she was being completely just eaten alive. And she talks about Princess Diana a lot too in this part. And she said that she related to Princess Diana because Princess Diana, unfortunately, was killed due to being hunted by the paparazzi. And she could kind of relate in that way, because they were literally hunting her down. And it was like every day there was a new story.
Every little thing she did was
scrutinized, like to fit this narrative of her, like, being cracked and crazy and all this stuff. And that shit would never fly today, because we have had so many important conversations about mental health.
Yes.
Celebrities have platforms now where they can tell their story. I mean, that would never, ever happen in today's world, which I'm so glad that we have come this far, where we've had these mental health conversations, and you can't just play with people's mental health like that and think that it's okay. So that was kind of harrowing to read about.
Celebrities are put there to keep people entertained and docile so they don't engage their minds. I don't necessarily agree in a way, because that makes it seem like celebrities aren't people. And I think in the social media world, we are starting to try to treat them more like people now. But I think that kind of mindset is why Mariah was targeted so heavily. Like, I think that's like that whole section, I was just kind of like, crap. We totally believed everything. We bought everything without even really thinking or second guessing or being like, are we sure this has happened?
Mm-hmm.
Are we sure? And it was just like, wow. To hear the other side was just wild.
I do think some interesting themes throughout the entire novel was like her faith in God, because her family wasn't especially spiritual. Like Pat certainly never like took her to church or nothing. And her dad went to like I think it's called a Unitarian. Is it?
I forgot what their denomination was.
It's that kind of church where it's not really like a church. Unitarian,
yeah, she actually was very spiritual for somebody who, based on what she said, didn't have a lot of spiritual, what's the word we're looking for? Spiritual guidance when she was younger.
Well, I think she really talks about her grandmother or her great grandmother who owned a church during like Jim Crow time. And she owned this church was it in Harlem, like a basement in Harlem, and they owned these brownstones, and it was her grandmother.
Oh, yeah. I forgot where she actually lived, but
or maybe it was her great grandmother. I think it was her great grandmother.
I think it was her great grandmother. But either way, there was spiritual women in her life.
Yeah.
So, and she actually gravitated towards them too. So there was that.
But she talks a lot in the second half of the biography about what pulled her out of that darkness, outside of getting therapy and getting professional help, was she found a church and she found a pastor, and she started reading her Bible, and she got baptized, and she really started to reconnect back with God. And that's really what helped to pull her out of that darkness that she was in and bring her back to the light. And I just thought it was interesting, because that was like a common thread throughout the entire autobiography, was her faith in God. And it was something, it seemed like she was kind of the only one in her family that had that, outside of, coming from that background with her great grandmother and her great aunt being pastors. Like, they own this church. She talked about how they own these townhomes in Harlem. And unfortunately, it was during Jim Crow, and they were forced out.
They were threatened, and then she grabbed her family and they never came back.
Mm-hmm.
See, another thing that I really liked, because I've always envisioned Mariah Carey to be this over-the-top diva who was, crazy to work with and da-da-da-da. So to hear the humbleness of Mariah, even though she was reading her own story, like, there were moments where I was like, she's not as, oh my gosh, yes, this part. Okay, so obviously Mariah has interacted with a lot of superstars in her lifetime. But the way that she trickled in certain celebrities into this story were just very beautiful. The fact that she did say that Prince gave her a Bible and gave her words of wisdom and stuff, but she did not disclose what Prince said because Prince was private.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really liked all of that.
Yes. I loved that. I loved, because she had this little section where she talked about important men and important women that she came across. What?
Oh, nothing. Keep going.
Oh, okay. And she talks about Prince. She talks about Stevie Wonder, because she talks about in the novel how Stevie Wonder is a huge, huge influence because of his songwriting, and how she just thinks he's brilliant and he's a huge inspiration to her. And she actually got a chance to like meet with him, talk with him, and create music with him. So she talks about that. She talks about, who were the other men she talks about who really inspired her? I'm drawing a blank, but she had
Luther Vandross, Stevie Wonder.
She talks about performing for Barack and Michelle Obama, and Michelle being the first one to know she was pregnant with twins.
Oh, and how she got to meet Nelson Mandela.
Whoa, Nelson
because
Mandela.
Oprah invited her.
Yes. She talks about these moments that she had that are truly like special to her. And yes, she talks about the women that she's met that she really admires. Exactly. Like Aretha, Diana Ross, like performing VH1 Divas. She talks about Marilyn Monroe and how that was like huge, huge inspiration in Marilyn's life, and how she really connects with her. And how she has Marilyn's mom's piano, which is really cool. Oh my gosh, the part in VH1 Divas was she threw Celine Dion so much shade. Do y'all remember that? Do you remember that part?
Which part?
Okay, so she was talking about VH1 Divas and how she was performing with, I think it was the Aretha Franklin tribute, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me, y'all, if I'm wrong. I believe it was the Aretha Franklin tribute, I want to say.
Was that the one where she was talking about the girl who was...
She was like, how dare you try to outsing the queen?
Oh, yes.
And then she was like, maybe it's a cultural situation, maybe. And I was like, who the heck is this? Who is the heck is this? And then I looked up the lineup for the VH1 Divas, and it was Celine Dion. We were talking about Celine Dion.
Is that who she was talking about?
And remember, because she said she started backing away until she became a part of the background dancers, because she was like, I want no parts. Or the background thing. She was like, I want no parts of this. I want no parts of this.
Holy mess.
Trying to come for the Queen of Soul, and I want no parts.
Oh no.
It was Celine Dion.
Holy mess. Yeah. Again, like listening to her recall these things, I want to go back and listen so bad.
Yep, that was so interesting.
I need a clip. YouTube, give me the clip, man.
And then she talks about how Diana Ross and her like wore the same dress but different colors for this like TV appearance. I don't know. She just talked about really cool moments of other artists that she's met that she really admires. The moment with Whitney Houston was especially touching because, you know, they did the When You Believe song for the Prince of Egypt soundtrack.
Which also, I forgot how much I love that song. And obviously, since I've been re-listening to Mariah, I was in here screaming that song.
That song literally used to make me cry when I was little, when I would watch the movie. But she talked about that, recording it with Whitney, and how her and Whitney, because the media always try to pit Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston against each other. Like, I remember this.
Yeah.
Because they always do this. They did the same thing with like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. They did the same thing with like Beyonce and like every other young Black artist, Ciara, like Rihanna, like Ashanti. Like, they did the same thing in the music industry. They would always pit like very talented women against each other. And it was just so cool to see her talk about this moment with her and Whitney and how they just bonded and they just loved each other while they were recording that song. And they just had this moment, and she treasures it because unfortunately Whitney is no longer with us. But that was really touching to hear that, you know, because the narrative that they painted was always like, oh, are you team Whitney or team Mariah, or who's the better singer?
And they always painted it to where like Mariah was just this horrible bitch.
Yeah. So it was really nice to see her just recount her moments with these amazing, incredibly talented men and women that she's met in the industry that she really looks up to and admires, and who've helped her along the way. That was really cool to see. What is going on in our chat?
I don't know. We're getting a couple trolls in here. So report. We're going to report them for hate speech.
Get blocked. Like, stop.
Like, this is crazy. Like, all of a sudden we're getting called the N-word in the chat. This is fun. Awesome. Anyways,
our mods aren't here
in a long time.
Our mods are not here tonight. That's why.
I know. Oh, that's right. None of our mods are here. Of course, the night that our mods aren't here, it's this. That's fine. I'm modding right now, so we're good, guys. Anyways, I just like the little part with Aaliyah where they were like, I guess trying to ask Aaliyah like, oh my gosh.
We literally just want to talk about this Mariah Carey book now. Y'all need to go find something else to do.
Yeah, go find something else to do. We're just talking about Mariah Carey.
Ridiculous. But anyway, what were we talking about? The Aaliyah part?
Yeah, the part where Aaliyah was like, I hope she gets better.
Aww.
And I'm like, oh.
So sweet.
I was like, that's really sweet. Thank you, Aaliyah. But yes. Do you guys have any favorite moments from the Mariah Carey book?
Yeah.
That we did not talk about? Because we've been talking
We did not talk about them babies at all.
We didn't, but I kind of don't want to. I kind of just like, if you really want to hear how she feels about her babies, read the book. It's so, the way she talks about what she did for those babies are beautiful.
It wraps up really well, I think. And she's in a really good space in her life right now. She's in a really good situation with her family. Her and Nick are co-parenting well. She's in a steady relationship. So the book ends well.
Right.
She goes through a lot. And it's so interesting because I realized she never talked about that one guy she was engaged to for a while. She just completely disregarded him. Remember, he was like a bodyguard?
The dancer?
No, he was like her bodyguard, the really like unattractive looking one.
Oh.
And they were engaged. And she just never talks about him at all.
Oh, Miss WOC reader.
Yeah, I can't. This is why I believe that Tommy was physically abusive towards her.
Yes.
Because why else did he feel so comfortable to take a knife and literally like do that to her face? You know? Sorry, y'all. We're trying to mod and have this at the same time.
Yeah, sorry, guys.
But yeah, so that knife scene had me, honestly, I was disappointed by the fact that there were men at that table and they said nothing. And I understand that she was like, the part that really upset me was she was like, my business partners. They were like business partners slash, you know, obviously she worked with them, like maybe they were producers or record execs, and she considered them friends, right? Like industry friends. And they just sat there.
That was the part. It was like, so he did this in front of people. Like he did this in front of people, and no one because Tommy had that much power.
People that were afraid of him and that were on his payroll, yeah.
Like Tommy did what he had to do to become in power, like in power. So I'm like, yo, this is nuts. Like, I can't.
And the irony is now he's, from what I read, he like stepped down from Sony some time ago and he has his own label now, I think, or something. It's just weird how he really literally tried to rebrand himself as this like family man. Like none of this happened and everything's fine now.
Right.
I'm not okay.
It's hard for me to talk about that scene because it was really shook. It was like, wow.
I feel bad for his kids because they're old enough to listen to this audiobook.
I don't think that they're going to, because I think Mariah lets them like really encourages them to like be kids.
No, I mean Tommy Mottola's kids.
Oh. Well, maybe they won't want to. Because I wouldn't want to listen or read anything bad about my dad either.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know, honestly. Yeah. I mean, does anybody else have any scenes? Because if Tommy does have this, I'm not going to talk about him because, you know, nope.
Look, doesn't surprise me because some of the things that he said about the Black artist was very clear he was racist.
It was very clear he was racist, yes. When he said that Diddy will be shining his shoes by the end of the week or something like that, I was like, dang.
He said in a couple years. He was like, in 5 years, he's going to be shining my shoes. I was like, oh.
Right.
Oh, gosh. Mariah always found herself in these situations where she became close to people that were racist. And I'm always like, how did this happen, sis?
Because they didn't know if she was Black or white.
I'm like, how did this happen?
Right.
How did we get here? I just felt for her.
We get here.
And I'm trying to think if there's anything we missed besides just like blatantly not talking about Nick and her.
Yeah, we're not talking about Nick either. Like, I just kind of felt like he was passing in the book the way that he was passing in her life. So it's whatever. Oh
dear.
Again, we're not going to talk about Derek Jeter anymore, but if you're interested about what we're talking about, we highly suggest this book. And if you can get your hands on the audiobook,
you will not
narrates the audiobook herself, and it's something about the way that she reads her story that is just fantastic. So we highly recommend it. Highly recommend it.
She brings her personality into it. She sings songs. She talks about like she correlates specific lyrics in her specific songs to what those lyrics were about. So it gives you a clarity and a deeper understanding into her music and where she was at the time when she was creating that music.
Right.
So I think we have finally talked about this enough.
I think we finally got it all out.
So I don't think we missed anything. I'm like racking my brains to see if we missed anything. I think we hit all the major points.
Right.
So now I just want to talk about like moving forward. What is our next book for the next couple months that we will be discussing in August?
Oh, it's my turn to pick a book.
Were you not prepared for this?
I was not. I completely forgot that it was my turn to pick a book. I'm going to have to announce it on our Instagram.
Do you have any contenders?
The amount of trolls today are insane.
Yeah, it must be a slow night on YouTube.
It must be. We're reporting you for harassment and hate speech.
Just block them. It's fine.
Jeez, this is tiring. I will announce it on our Instagram because I haven't picked a book yet, guys, and I'm so sorry. But when is our next live?
I'm trying to think. So this book we read during, was it May and June?
Yes.
So I guess June, July. No, the next one is
No,
August,
I'm talking
right?
about when's our next podcast? Because we have another podcast this month.
Monday, I think.
Oh, so if you guys want to come back tomorrow is just a Q&A session. So if you want to come back, we'll be here. Oh, thank you. We are reading a mystery book, but the book is downstairs and I forgot the name of the book. So I'm going to announce it on our Instagram tomorrow. And then I'll also announce it during our live. It's really annoying that we have so many trolls today and all we were doing was talking about Mariah Carey.
That was it.
Like, I don't understand what we did today.
Oh, it's exhausting. But yes.
To those who came, thank you so much. We appreciate you guys.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. This was so much fun. I really needed to talk about this book.
I did too.
There were just so many things that needed to be discussed. There were so many moments. And I have definitely a whole new appreciation for Mariah Carey and her music.
Me too.
I'm going to be re-listening to her entire
I'm watching all music videos and everything. It's becoming like a whole event for me.
Yes. And I looked back and she has so many albums. Like, I guess I just never realized how many albums she has. So I'm really excited to revisit some of my favorite ones and maybe even listen to ones that I never really listened to, because some of her later ones, past the Emancipation of Mimi, it got a little rocky there for me. Like with listening to her music. So I'm excited to listen to those. And I'm just really glad I read this or listened to this. My favorite Mariah song. Oh, I have so many.
Always Be My Baby is hands down still my favorite song.
Really?
No matter what. I have so many memories attached to that song.
I'm part of you indefinitely. I like that one. I also really like My All. I like Whenever You Call.
My All has a whole new meaning for me now, so I really love it.
I love Whenever You Call. I love Hero. I love...
Oh my gosh, Looking In
is always a bop. Heartbreaker never gets old.
Heartbreaker, yes.
Whenever it comes on, I'm like, yes, me and Mariah. I love that song too. I'm trying to think. I feel like I don't have a favorite because I just love so many of them.
Right.
There's one she did with with Boyz II Men. Is it One Sweet Day? Every time I hear that song, I get emotional. I love that one.
There's so many.
And then there's some really good ones in the Emancipation of Mimi album.
Yes.
As well. God, it's so hard to pick a favorite. I feel like I
can't pick a favorite right now because I'm going back and re-listening to everything with new ears. So I think I might have a different favorite after I'm done listening to everything, because I'm really going back and I started from the beginning. So that's
growing up, Daydream and Music Box were two of my favorites. And then as I got a little bit older, I feel like I kind of grew up listening to her music. So with every new like age, I guess, that I turned, there was like a new Mariah Carey album to like get me through that stage of life. Because I also recall really loving Rainbow at one point in my life, the album, and really loving the Butterfly album at one point. Like, so it's hard to pick because I feel like whenever I think about her albums, I go back to a specific point in my life and I'm like, ooh, I love that album during this, like my middle school years. I love that album, like early high school. So, but yes.
Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your night. Remember to hydrate, and we will talk to you guys later.
Yes.
Bye.
See you tomorrow. Bye.